Pinkerton Student Liaison, Shannon Caffell.
Here.
Thank you. And also seated at the board table is Superintendent Bob Thompson and Director of Student Services, Jessica Parson. And also calling in by telephone line is CFO Jeff Dowd.
All right. Would you all mind standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you all. Board members, in your packet, you have two sets of meeting minutes, one for the November 14th, 2020 regular meeting, and then the November 14th, 2023 non-public. I ask you to take a look at that and look for a motion and discussion.
Sorry. I will make a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes from November 14th and also the non-public minutes from November 14th.
I'll go ahead and second. Any discussion? All approved?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Melissa, are there any public comments?
There are none tonight.
All right, thank you. Next, we're going to move on to the school highlights with Principal Mayberry.
Good evening. I have quite a few highlights to share with you. We've been busy over this last month. First of my highlights is Kindness Week. Last week culminated, the week prior to that was our full week of Kindness Week and ended on Monday with a big assembly. Our ABC Club, Anti-Bullying Club, and Sunshine Squad put together a week full of spirit days, pajama day, dress like a student or dress like your teacher day, multiple days throughout the week that had different kindness themes. Our advisories made kindness chains with kind sayings on them, and we really just had students making announcements every day and focused on different kindness things. Went really well. The students worked hard, and it was an awesome week. And then on Monday, last Monday before the break, we culminated that week with an awesome assembly. We had members of Recycled Percussion and the same people who do the Chaos and Kindness TV show come and perform for our whole school. It was a fantastic assembly. Really just a lot of spirit, a lot of the theme of kindness, and students were excited. So a huge congratulations to our ABC and Sunshine Squad and Mrs. Bunnell and Mrs. Karpinski who organized all of those events. We even have two really nice articles, actually, if anybody wants to look. The Union Leader did a nice article about the assembly, as did the Eagle Tribune. So those were there for people to take a look at. Veterans Day, we had a great Veterans Day assembly on November 9th. A really, again, school-wide assembly, great student-led assembly with some super participation, and a lot of veterans and their families came for the assembly and also for breakfast after. The students made breakfast. It was our student council with Mrs. Rubin who put on a fantastic pancake breakfast for veterans and their families. And Mrs. Wolf and Mrs. Mayu and the student leaders in 8th grade did a great job putting on that presentation and assembly. Quarter one has come to a close. Report cards are out there and available on the parent portal. For parents that haven't seen that yet, they can access that, the report card with the teacher comments. And I encourage everyone to take a look, and talked to a student today who didn't know how to find them. So anybody that needs help finding where those report cards lie in Power School can certainly give us a call, and we're happy to help with that. As a staff, we are spending some of our data meeting time looking at quarter one grades and just checking on students and making sure that students who did struggle in quarter one are receiving the supports they need. Parent conferences happened at the end of quarter one, and that was really well attended. We had a lot of parents. We even had our large grade level needed to add additional conference time to get all of the parents in. So I was really pleased to see how many parents were able to attend conferences. If there are parents out there that didn't get to attend and would like to meet with the teachers, they should certainly reach out, because we're happy to set those meetings up. And fall sports, we had an extremely successful fall season with some championships. It's not often that you have multiple championships in one season. Our girls cross country team are the state champions, which was phenomenal, and then our boys and girls soccer teams finished the league champions. So we were really, really excited for them and super proud of them, and proud of all of our athletes that competed. And believe it or not, winter sports are already underway. We had our first home basketball opener yesterday. Our boys and girls A teams played Raymond, and both teams won, and our cheer squad was there cheering them on, so it was great. It's, you know, one ends and another begins very quickly, so we are underway and cruising along and really busy. Any questions?
Congrats to the teams on the championships.
Thanks.
Amazing. All right. Next up is Shannon Capel to give us an update on Pinkerton.
All right. The junior historians and Pinkerton's Air Force, ROTC, these students put together a presentation to the historian board at the Derry Historical Center, and they were able to work on a project and open a room back up for Alan Shepard's birthday. They worked to create and show things that had been to space, and it was really cool to see the presentation they had made, and that it was mostly student done. The Pinkerton Players are presenting the 12th night of Shakespeare comedy this weekend as we head into December. The World Language Honor Society is hosting a winter coat drive. This was a big hit last year. We collected over 400 clothing items that we were able to donate. A tough game for the Astros in football. The quarterfinals against Londonderry. Sadly, we lost, but they did have an amazing season. We have an early release next Wednesday, December 6th. And then fall sports have totally wrapped up, and winter tryouts have actually almost all wrapped up too. So I can't wait for those to begin.
That's great. Thanks, Shannon. Any questions for Shannon?
Thank you so
All right.
much.
All right, thank you. All right, we are going to move on to current business now. We are going to make a bit of a change. We are going to go into non-public immediately prior to talking about the town of Hampstead's 275th anniversary. We have Mr. Bob Kelly, Deputy Chief Kelly, here to talk about some security concerns that we have and some security risk. So at this point, we are going to go to non-public. Those that are in the audience, we'll have to ask you to leave the room for a little bit so we can have some discussions. We do plan on coming back in about 10-15 minutes, I'd say. But we'll be shutting the doors and having some discussions, and we'll be back online for those watching at home. And I'd guess about 10-15 minutes. All right, thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. Coming out of non-public at 7:35 p.m. There was no vote. We do want to thank the Hampstead Police Department for coming and spending some time to walk through some processes, policies, etc. It's always appreciated in what they do for us. So we're going to move on to current business. We're going to turn it over to Mr. Thompson to give an update on the town of Hampstead's 275th anniversary planning.
Oh, excellent. So the school district is excited to participate in the celebration of Hampstead's 275th anniversary. That includes us planning activities for January, which includes the actual 275th anniversary, but throughout the spring, and then also the celebration in August. So I thought I would turn it over to Mrs. Milbury, who's going to talk about some of the things that are going on at the middle school.
Thank you. We are in the early stages of planning. Really, our social studies team is taking the lead on this, and they've been having communications within their team meetings. We know that we want to do a celebration in January with the kids. We want to continue our theme that we have here going, that, with student-led celebrations and assemblies, so it will involve some students leading things. We're going to piggyback on 5th grade, just has already done a field trip in the fall to the Historical Society and the church and cemetery, and started to really dig into Hampstead history already, so they're going to be able to share some of that knowledge as part of it. We also want to coordinate with the central school and do some kind of a celebration, probably in the spring, that includes both schools together, doing a big celebration together, and perhaps even being able to invite the community in, although numbers-wise, we can put a lot of people in the gym, but we do have a cap. So we're, like I said, just kind of in the early development, but it will be run mostly through our social studies teachers, and each grade level will have some different pieces to it that we're really excited about.
Thank you.
And Dr. Cheney's not here tonight, but there is a planning meeting next week at HCS. They've identified 2 teacher leaders that are going to help kind of take the lead with facilitating some of the activities. Right now, the idea is to incorporate some of the 275th anniversary celebration into the spring community show that they do, field day as well. And then we've had some preliminary discussions about what the summer will look like when we're not in session. We are in session, actually. We have our Summer Learning Academy and our extended school year program. So we're going to look for ways to have those kids work to produce something for the actual celebration in August. So it's still in the early phases. We're excited to participate and look forward to all the activities. And again, this is when we talk about our strategic plan deliverables. This is one of the deliverables that we have in that document under Priority 5.
Will somebody be attending the next committee meeting for the 275th?
I will double check to make sure, but we can certainly get somebody there.
I think
So
the next
I
one
know
is
Mrs.
in
Howard has been.
January. It's not going to be in
Yep.
December, so.
Yep, so I will make sure that we have additional representation there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, next we're going to move on to donation acceptance for the lacrosse program. Looks like we got another donation. This one, again, Ms. Milbury.
Thank you. I am happy to ask the acceptance of the very generous donation from the Middle School Athletics Club for $1,000 to go towards the lacrosse program.
All right. I'll make a motion to accept a $1,000 donation from the Hampstead Middle School Athletic Club.
I'll second that.
All right, discussion? Big thank you to the whole group there. They do a lot of great work, so all approved? All right, thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right. Next, we can turn it over to Mr. Dowd, who is on the phone with us, homesick, but we appreciate him calling in to give us some information and updates as we go through this.
And actually, we have Mr. Dowd on
Sorry.
the line for...
Mr. Dowd's on the line for questions,
for
but Ms.
questions.
Parsons is going to go over it.
Filling in for Mr.
Filling in for Dowd. Thank you.
In person, at least.
So I have the pleasure of updating you on where we're at with transportation. So actually, we had conducted our opening of the RFPs today, which is our request for proposals for the transportation services. We received 1 bid for general education, and we received 2 bids for special education transportation. Both bidding parties were present when we were opening the bids, and that just allows for transparency and fairness in our process. And in attendance was Mr. Dowd via phone, Superintendent Thompson, myself, and Lisa Gove from the business office. And we followed all proper procedures, but after opening, our team kind of performed an initial review of the pricing sheets. And essentially, they give you like a 1-sheeter on the pricing, and you kind of compare, and they're similar formatted. And like, I'll share some of the preliminary findings. The bid for general education transportation showed an increase of approximately 14%. While our initial projections and our anticipated budget was only about a 10% increase, Mr. Dowd has accounted for this in the updated budget presentation that we're going to provide for you in a little bit, so you can kind of see that impact. On the special education side, We still want to, there still needs to be a little bit further analysis and comparing between the two bids, because we just want to make sure we're kind of looking at every little detail. But I will say that one of the highlights of our current provider, who also rebid on the special education piece, is that they recognize that our in-district busing hours are extended because Pinkerton's considered in-district for us, even though they're kind of far away. And so typically an in-district route is anywhere between 5 and 6 hours. And so we get excess cost charges because our school day runs so long from Pinkerton in-district to when Central School gets out. So they incorporated that in their proposal to us and extended it to an 8-hour day with our costs, so that we avoid those excess costs that are continuing to reoccur. Again, we're going to kind of do a little bit more analysis on that, but we're going to talk about the budgetary impact when we get to that budget sheet. I just wanted to give you kind of a quick review of the process and what transpired today. Any questions?
If I can chime in.
Yep, Mr. Dowd?
All right. So we did receive those RFP responses from 2 vendors. I personally reached out to 6 vendors who operate in the state. We published in the Union Leader on the 17th a notification of this RFP. I subsequently updated with some questions we had from vendors on our own RFP page, where we were able to have a frequently asked questions section. What's interesting about the bid that came in for our general transportation is that it would appear to be a 17% increase. However, there is an alternate bid, which is about a 14% increase. The difference is that the alternate bid that they've submitted would allow buses to be up to 10 years old under the contract. And the difference is quite a bit. So that's another thing that we're looking at. We've typically required our buses to be much newer. In the past, we've found that sometimes that's not always better, because sometimes you want the buses that operate really well, and when you force a turnover of buses to the newer version, sometimes they aren't the best operational vehicles. So we'll see, but I just wanted to give the board an update, and thank you, Jessica, for that. And I don't know if the board has any thoughts on the up to 10 years, but for a 3% reduction, I might be okay with that.
Me, yes. Other board members, any input to that?
Okay.
Not particularly.
What's that?
I don't know why it would really matter so much.
I mean, as long as they're keeping the maintenance of the
Right,
buses,
I mean,
that's the main thing. Is
Their responsibility to make sure they're running, so.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the priority is obviously safety.
Right.
Yes.
As long as they're safe, they're inspected, they're,
Exactly.
then no concerns.
Yes, and quite frankly, the group of buses that we have right now appear to be some of the better operating buses that we've had over the time that I've been with the combined district. So it's not a bad thing at all.
okay. It sounds like we're all open to having that 3% reduction in 10,
Yep.
year-old buses.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Next up is an update from Mr. Thompson about the SAU 55 lease agreement.
All right, at the previous board meeting, we discussed that the lease agreement for the school district office located at 20 Mary E. Clark Drive will expire on June 30th. So we're in the process of negotiating with the landlord and his agent regarding a new contract. I did make the board aware that there were some concerns about ADA access and the elevator. That prompted us to look at a unit downstairs. It has also prompted us since the last meeting to explore other options. So we are in the process of doing that. Even yesterday, I had the opportunity to tour another office space in Hampstead. It's not ideal, and I don't think at this time it would be worth us exploring that space. There were 3 other spaces that have been considered. Some of them are cost prohibitive. Another one is in a retail section. So what I'm going to do is just let the board know that there has been some progress with the landlord in terms of the elevator. There has been a company out that has done further inspection And we have some indication that some of the repairs will take place to have it be in good working order. So I think ultimately, what I'd like to do is defer any decision regarding the lease agreement. Again, the lease agreement expires June 30th. So we still have plenty of time if we were to pick up this conversation in January.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Thompson on that?
Nope.
All right. All right. Let's go into next the HCS addition plan discussion. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to hand out, and this was at the request of the board. The board had requested looking at getting an earlier projection of surplus, because understanding where we are in November on surplus may drive some of the decision-making that needs to be made about what the building project would look like for the March warrant. So what I'm going to hand out is the projection that Mr. Dowd created based upon, as of November 28th, 2023. And this will help drive the discussion. And again, just for review, prior to the previous board meeting, the HCS Building Committee met. They continued their review and discussion of which option to move forward with. Again, this is based upon 3 options. The first option would be 6 classrooms. That would be 4 classrooms off of the back of the 60s wing, 2 in the Cove. They also explored an option of just 4 classrooms off the back. And then the third option being just the 2 Cove classrooms. So at that meeting, the building committee made a recommendation for 6 classrooms. There was some brief discussion at the previous board meeting, and I think it would be important for us to continue that discussion, knowing that we're preparing to set the warrant for March.
So appreciate the analysis, kind of a 5 plus 7, just about a 6 plus 6 on forecasts versus actuals. Board members, if you want to take a minute, take a look at what's in here, and then we can ask Mr. Dowd any questions about this specifically, and then start talking about, next steps as far as warrant articles and whatnot with school addition.
So I had somebody from the town ask me, why do we budget more money than we're going to need? And it's my understanding is we're required to have the budget is the maximum amount of benefits we could possibly have if everybody took advantage of every benefit. And then that's not normally the case, so that always creates somewhat of a buffer. Is that true?
Mr. Dowd, I don't know if you heard the Dr. Hubner's question, but I can.
So what he was asking about is, every year school districts budget, and there's, I'm going to say typically, it's really a bad year if you're over budget, but typically you expend less than you budget, and asking, why is that? What's the cause of that difference of what you budget that goes to the voters versus what you actually expend in that year for that budget that was approved?
Okay, and so we do have to gross budget, so anything that we anticipate that we're going to have as an expense, we have to recognize in the budget. There are times that we will not have, I don't think we've ever been at a point that we're at 100% solid staffing, and so you've always got some leverage there, some ability there to recover. We still have to budget for the positions and for our needs, and I think that really is probably the best answer. We do have to gross budget. And
I would just add, just for clarity on this though, that we budget certain things and then we anticipate what this, as an example, what we get for state funding, and if that's more, we get money towards us, which means we spend less of what that we have in our expense. Our expenses are less. We also go after any type of grants. So if we get grants, that's additional funding, which means we expend less of the money that we anticipated. As an example, I think it's on tonight's agenda.
Yeah, from
We'll go
Minnesota.
over grant funding receipts as an example. We can't bank on that we're going to get X amount of dollars every year. We hope we do. We go after it pretty aggressively. But we have to put that in our budgets to cover that in case we don't get those grants.
So I think, Carl, to your question, we don't have to budget for every single worst-case scenario in terms of, we'll just use the example of like a family plan. A family health insurance plan costs significantly more than a single plan. But we know that, a certain number of people are going to retire, certain number of new people are going to come on. Some will go on family plans, some will go on single plans. So it wouldn't be prudent for us to budget for all family plans, but it also wouldn't be prudent to budget for all single plans either. So what Mr. Dowd does, and I've seen him work this magic, is make a calculation based upon previous years and what he anticipates, and that does result. Obviously, we want to be somewhat conservative in that estimate. That does result in some amount of money that we go back, because it's very easy to give money back to the taxpayers. It's a lot harder to raise and appropriate additional funds if we were short. But you also have to consider that a surplus is made up of both unexpended funds, but also, as David indicated, revenue. We don't know what amount of money we're going to get from the federal government or the state. It varies wildly. We saw this with the last adjustment with adequacy that happened. We also get revenue from our health insurance company if there were an overage. And so there is some unpredictability. I would argue that when you have a $1 or $2 million surplus on a $33, $34 million budget, your accuracy in budgeting is well over 90%. That's pretty darn good, all things considered. So
Typically, if we go back at least the last 4 or 5 years I've been on the board, typically we're between that 3 and 6%. So in other words, for every $100 that we budgeted, we're spending 97 cents, 95 cents-ish. And that's how much we're saving, is that 3 to 5 cents per dollar.
I feel I wanted to address it because somebody had brought it up. But
Yep.
for example, having that wiggle room is good, say if the septic tank fails
Right.
at the central school, or having that money just in case. So no, I think it's very well done.
And I think it's important to remember, too, that just because we have the budget for something, we're not going to spend it because we have the budget for it. If it turns out that we get a better deal, or we don't, turns out, or that we've been able to competitively bid and save money, we aren't going to go in and spend that line to the budget max just to spend the budget, which I know might be the practice in some communities. It's just not something that we do in Hampstead.
Right. Which is why every year we have excess and we're sending money back. All right, so to come back to the sheet on the, again, this is just projections right now for what the year end would be. Any questions on this right now? The only one I was going to, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I'll point out as well, when we talk about surplus and return to the taxpayers, you'll see on the worksheet that you have in front of you, we have an expense surplus and a revenue surplus.
Right.
Some years we have an abundance of unanticipated revenue that we can send back to the taxpayers. Other times we have an expense surplus. And so you can see what I'm projecting this year, we don't have any surprise revenue surplus items. So revenue surplus is relatively low compared to what expense might be. And in some years we've had very, very favorable. We've had higher revenue surplus, I think, than expense surplus. So.
The only question I had on this, Jeff, that just popped out is around outside tuitions. Can you answer why we think that we're going to have a favorable expenses, meaning we'll underspend by $300,000, what we're anticipating right now?
We're 1 for 1 with Pinkerton. So if we have a decline or someone opts out to go to Pinkerton, that's a dollar for dollar savings. And so we have a number of we project out our enrollment, and if we don't have as many students enroll at Pinkerton,
Got it.
we end up with that savings.
Okay. So
The flip side, though, is that I can't underestimate how many I think we're going to need, because then we don't have enough money to pay in case everyone wants to go.
Yep, got it. All right. Thank you. So this activity right here, just to remind everyone, this was to look at, what would we anticipate with the year-end budget, if anything that we would be looking to utilize here for any type of support for an addition? To understand, would we use anything from the budget? Would we look, for another capital improvement plan warrant article to allocate money? Just what does that look like? So we can try to better plan for what we want to do to support the addition. Any questions on this right now?
Where's the fund balance retained amount coming from?
That's what the board votes. I think you probably voted in May or June of last year to retain that amount.
Correct.
Okay.
And hold it for emergencies and a whole bunch of things that you can use it for.
Right.
But that fund balance retained will be released at the end of the year unless it's renewed. If the board were to vote the same fund balance retention next year at $500,000, then your surplus would just be the 904,
I see.
904,000.
All right. Any other questions on what Mr. Dowd has prepared here?
If I remember right, one of the reasons it was 500,000 was the concern over the septic tank and that we might need to replace it.
Mostly septic, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So I think this is where we should start to discuss what we want to do as far as the addition. So in the past, what we talked about, again, we had the option of 2, 4, or 6. We know that if we go after the 6, there's about a $700,000 to $800,000, I'd say, benefit to doing the 6 together. Meaning, if round numbers here, it was about 1.8, 1.9, 1.5 for the 2 classrooms, 4 million for, just under 4 million for the 4 classrooms, and it was 4.65 for the 6 classrooms together, and that's where there's $1.5 million difference, or the $800,000 difference of 2 classrooms, 4 classrooms, 6 classrooms.
And also, a reminder that our capital reserve balance is $2 million.
Right.
So that money would be used to offset whatever projects the board decided to move forward with.
And so I know, board, I know some of us have talked just about what, makes the most sense to do based on a lot of different factors.
I mean, personally, I'm leaning toward the 2 classroom option, utilizing the money that we have within the capital reserve. I feel like doing something is better than doing nothing at all. And if 6 classrooms is too expensive and 4 classrooms is too expensive, then let's move forward with some sense of progress and, look to future years to continue if we need to.
I would agree. I mean, we've heard the community, we've heard a lot of the concerns from the community. We have the money in capital reserve right now to fund the 2 classrooms. I think that makes the most logical sense overall. At least we're getting something and we're helping the school versus potentially putting 6 classrooms on, having it voted down as a no and getting nothing. And then we're staying somewhat fiscally responsible for the community and not asking for more money in a year that's already proven to be difficult for many.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, obviously, I would love to have the 6, but I think given all the circumstances going on right now and the tax rate and all that, I think, the 2 classrooms we know we can do. I mean, I hate to do this in pieces, but I think we're going to have to do this in pieces.
I feel like if we're going to do the 2 classrooms, so it's $1.5 million effectively, or close to it, we have $2 million in, I feel like we should still try to add to the capital reserve this coming year so the capital reserve starts going back up so that eventually we can make more modifications on the school at some point.
Right. Yeah, that's why I'd be in favor of the 2 is for, one reason is raise capital reserve again, so another warrant article for that. I think it's also what we've talked about is building aid at the New Hampshire level this allows us to buy time to see if next time with a different plan, because we're going to have to resubmit a plan no matter what.
Yep.
Because the plan that we submitted before would not go forward.
Well, if the board were to decide to move forward with the 2 classroom infill, our application for building aid remains active with the Department of Education. And the new ranking system, it stays in the queue. So if a future project were to be considered, and you were to consider the project that was proposed last year, we were awarded building aid. So at some point, we will get building aid because we are in the ranking.
Right.
And then the board could have a conversation about, do we want to move forward with that project? We've built up capital reserve. We're going to have 30% applied to this project. So if you were to vote for the 2 classrooms, you're preserving our position in the ranking for building aid.
Right. Because the plan that we submitted to the DOE did not have the 2 classrooms.
It did
so our
not
plan
have the
stays
2
intact.
classrooms. Yep.
So our ranking stays intact. And again, we moved up from, correct me if I'm wrong, we went from number 8 to, I think we're number 6 now, or number 5.
It really is kind of the perspective you take in terms of like which school districts plan to move forward,
Right.
which we don't know definitively, but I do believe we've moved up to, I think, around 5.
Right.
And we'll have a better sense once school districts begin to set their warrant articles as to which districts are pursuing building aid, so we'll have a better sense.
Right.
There is a chance, and I am hesitant to say this, we could be notified by the Department of Education in January that we've gotten the award. Now, that would give us 3 years. You have 3 years to actually begin a project. That would give us 3 years to begin
Right.
to build up capital reserves if the board decided to move forward with last year's project.
Right. So that's where, if we move forward with 2 classrooms, that leaves us with 500,000. And knowing that if we were to go to, let's say, 2 classrooms, 4 classrooms, right? Hopefully 4 classrooms next time, because it makes sense based on the plan of 2 classrooms stacked on top of each other. We're going to have to, save up a little bit of money there to get that done. And if we're trying to, there's a lot of red tape there with, DOE as far as what we need to move forward with. But that'll be for future boards to discuss of how they get there. But I think the most prudent things are 2 steps. Decide on how many classrooms we go after, and 2 is warrant article for continuing to add to capital reserve.
And I heard board members mention this, but it's worth repeating for the community. I think most people are aware of this. 2 is not enough, right? We recognize that. It's this sort of little relief valve that allows us the opportunity to get something that will not have a future tax impact because it's money we have in the capital reserve. But we will complete that project and need to be in the planning phases for, okay, what is next? Last year's project was the one and done, let's get it done, this will meet our needs. This is a sort of relief valve as we, look to a future project.
Right.
Do we have any idea how long it will take for I don't know if you can even answer this, how long they anticipate it will take to build the 2 classrooms?
I believe, and I think, David, you've been part of those conversations, about a year?
No, it'd be under a year. And if they get a signal that we got to talk about this, if this is the way we go, if there's a way that we can look to support some of the long lead material, and we need to talk, first we have to decide, one, what are we going to do? No one will go 2 classrooms. We'd then, if we went with 2 classrooms, then we talk to them about what are the long lead materials, because that's the biggest issue right there. And then we'll start talking about schedule. But it was under a year to do the 2 classrooms.
And then the other piece that's definitely, as an instructional leader, you can't underestimate the impact that an active construction project has on a school during the school year, especially when we're talking about the kindergarten wing. So when Dr. Cheney and I were having discussions about the instructional impact and the possibility of 4 classrooms being constructed off the back, 2 in the Cove, a project of that magnitude would be very disruptive. And I go back to the 60s renovation. They were nearly done when the school year started. The feedback that we got from teachers was that project was really disruptive despite the efforts by the contractor to minimize that.
Right.
So going with 2 classroom addition will still have impact. It's going to be disruptive, but far less than what would happen if it were a 6. If we were to go with 6, we would need to discuss some type of plan of relocating some of HCS's student body to this school. And I know that's not a popular option for parents.
Do we need a warrant article to utilize the capital reserve?
We would.
Okay.
There would be, so essentially, we would have, with the plan we're discussing that as a potential, it would be, we'd have our budget, we'd have a warrant article to use capital reserve, we'd have I'm assuming, a capital reserve warrant article to increase the capital reserve to whatever dollar threshold we would ask for.
And it was 500,000 last year?
1 million.
It was 1 million last year?
Yep. Yeah, so. I do agree on the breathing room. I mean, if we go back to the NESDEC enrollments, let's see, I want to go back to 2021. Our student population was about, I'm going to say approximately, I could be wrong by a couple digits, but 425. In 2021, NASDAQ said that we would be around 475 to 485, I believe, maybe a little bit more than 485. So, and we're at 475 right now. So that was pretty spot on. I mean, 10 over 475, it's a error rate of, I don't know, 1%. And the numbers we saw last week said in another 4 years, will be over 500. So right now, the projections have been about 1% error rate compared to the actuals. And if you go back to 2016, 17, you compare those, it's pretty steady, 1 to 2% difference of projections versus actuals.
Yeah, and for me, it was the 2 humps, right? In 3 years, we're going to have 20 more kids, and then another 2 years after that, we're going to have 20 additional kids. So
more of that, but yeah.
Yeah, but we have to have 2 more classrooms in the next couple of years, and we need more, at least 2 more classrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right
if you
after
look at
that.
the projections, and again, you got to be careful because the more years you go out, the less
Right. That's what I'm
reliable the
saying, 2 to
data
3
is.
years, you know.
But if you were even to look at, yeah, the projection would be that in 7 years we'll have 70 additional kids. And the other thing too that's really important in the conversations that Jess and I are having a lot of is don't just look at the number, look at the need. We really need to have a conversation about what the expansion of universal kindergarten looks like, but also preschool. The preschool numbers, as we've indicated to the board, for children with disabilities is going up significantly. We need to create space for these students. And so that's not necessarily reflected in that enrollment number, but it's certainly projected in our special education numbers as well. So we have to do something. There's an urgency to the preschool issue.
And that's where I think that what we've talked about is right now we have preschool that has, there are students with special needs and there are students that are not.
Yeah.
What that would force us to do is those without special needs would be essentially saying we can't because we have to support the ones with special needs. The ones without, we choose to. So that's the first part we would have to do, correct?
Yeah, and we talk about, intervention, right? Making sure that our students are achieving at or above grade level. And, I had the opportunity to sit in with one of the grade level teams to talk about what do they think? What are the resources you need? What are the best interventions we can put in place? And honestly, universal kindergarten, making sure that all kids, we had a level playing field so that when kids went into first grade, that there was this level playing field in terms of what instruction. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that. Not to put you on the spot, but.
No, and I think that keeps coming up when referrals.
Oh, yep, there you go.
When referrals happen is one of the questions we ask is, did the student have full day K or half day K? And we're seeing definitely the data around kiddos that aren't there full day for kindergarten. So those discrepancies are impacting them. And we know early intervention is the best intervention. So that's an extra 2.5 to 3 hours a day they're not getting that their peers are getting. You imagine that? That's a half a year of instruction that they're missing in compared to their peers. So they go into first grade and they're already a half a year behind some of their peers. And if you compound that with the potential deficits in any of the areas of learning, we're growing, we're growing the challenges there for them. So it is important that we continue to keep that on our radar, because I think that may, in the long run, help us to decrease the number of referrals and potentially kiddos needing extra support because we're providing it universally for them.
All right.
So, yeah, I think viewing this as playing the long game, so to speak, the 2 classrooms keeps our foot in the door for the building aid, and we can view this long-term, where if we get approved for the building aid, then we look to add more classrooms when we can.
Okay. So I don't think we need a vote right now on this. It's more of directionally, we need to start creating warrant article, et cetera, for what we want to do with 2 classrooms and start to have that conversation. But I want to make sure our board members are in alignment on 2 classrooms is the direction we want to go.
So I understand you're not going to vote, but there's consensus from the board so that we can communicate this to the project manager and other stakeholders. There's consensus from the board of moving forward with the 2
Correct.
classroom project. Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And unless there's any other questions on this comments? All right. All right. Next is the budget discussion. So Ms. Thompson, you're going to present.
Yeah, so there's a document that you have in your packet that's titled the Hampstead School District Proposed Budget. So we'll start with that, and then I have another handout for you afterwards. So again, there's always this evolution to the budget, right? We begin by looking at department budgets. We put those together with the overall operating budget. As the fall progresses, we get actual firm numbers for things like tuition, insurance. And so what we do is we come back to the board with the most accurate and up-to-date numbers. So we're moving away from forecasts to having actuals. So there have been some changes that are actually favorable. So if you look at the document that is in your packet, so the 2024-25 proposed budget is now been adjusted to $36,552,508. That is a difference from last year's operating budget, or change from 2023-24 of a 5.46%. Now the changes since the last presentation, again, the number has changed, reflects approximately $109,000 decrease based upon the actual tuition of Pinkerton Academy. It represents a $150,000 reduction in actual insurance figures. And then again, as Jessica indicated, we received a 14% increase. We had budgeted for 14, so that's a $97,859 difference. So this is the adjustment. Myself or Mr. Dowd. Mr. Dowd, is there anything that you want to add to that analysis?
I think that's it.
The second piece of that was an exercise that the board had.
Just a real quick one on that, Ms. Thompson. So just for those at home, just because we're not presenting anything here, since the last time we met, the budget request that's, as of right now, has decreased by about $162,000.
That is correct.
Okay, just make sure that for those at home. All right, thank you.
And then I have, actually, I'll just send that.
We'll get you another copy over there. We need one more, yep.
Snag. So the board tasked me with coming up with some hypotheticals. They asked me to look at what a $100,000 hypothetical reduction in the operating budget would be, $300,000 and then $500,000 as well. I have to tell you that this was one of the hardest things that I think I've had to do because it's not, whenever we talk about reducing the proposed operating budget, we're already so lean and mean and tight with what we bring forward to you that to go through and make reductions, every reduction has an impact or a risk to the district. And obviously, the goal is to reduce any impact that it might have to student learning. That is number one and the first thing that we do. So I'll give you an opportunity to look through those three lists. This is just a conversation for us to have. If you want to provide me with some direction, it would be helpful to know what the board is thinking in terms of any adjustments that would like to be made. I'm happy to speak to any of the items that are on this list.
Regarding the adjustment in insurance and benefits, what really does that mean, and what would that look like? What would the impact be?
Yeah, so actually, I'll refer you back to the document that was in your packet. Like, we made adjustments on insurance based upon actuals, but Carl raised a good point about, like, how much do we budget for, right? There's sort of a forecast. And so when our CFO, I say to him, like, look, can we reduce the forecast? We're increasing a little bit of risk, right? So essentially the $20,000 is reducing what we think we're going to need for insurance and benefits based upon retirements and new people coming in. What that does is it increases our risk, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yep.
We could make that number as high as you like. I wouldn't recommend that you do that because you would be substantially increasing the risk to the district. We believe $20,000 worth of risk is something that we could advise you if you believed we needed to cut $100,000 that we could do.
Yeah, I don't think they do. How often do you replace the administrator and staff laptops?
Right now, we're on a 4-year cycle. And that really is sort of best practice. We can certainly defer that. It's not ideal. I would also say it's not ideal in the world that we live in today with cybersecurity risks. It's good to have the technology needed to get the job done. So but instructional impact to children is fairly minimal if our administrators have to wait an additional year to get their new laptops.
I do think, though, that if you have old laptops and slow laptops and issues with laptops, that means you have downtime for administrators who don't have enough time as it is. So I'd rather not go in that direction.
Under the $100,000 reduction, and then again in the $300,000, you have Summer Learning Academy, and you have two different amounts. What's the difference? What are you looking at between those two items?
Yeah, so in the operating budget, the total allocation for Summer Learning Academy is $28,000. In speaking with both Nicole and Jess, I do believe that we should be able to secure some grant funding. There's also Camp Invention is a good example. We run Camp Invention. It's free of charge to families. A lot of districts run Camp Invention. They just charge them. So ideally, we get all $28,000 and we can run the continuity of the same great experience that we had before. $100,000 cut, I would cut, a portion of Summer Learning Academy. And then obviously, if we were to get all the way to $500,000, we would not fund Summer Learning Academy. We would look to grant funding, but there's no guarantee that would, we'd be able to do that.
Can you speak to the students that actually participate? What's the participation rate?
So I know that it really depends. Summer Learning Academy, there's a variety of programs. And I guess the short answer is I can give you actual numbers, but there are a variety of programs. And some of those I know that the Camp Invention, the robotics piece that kids were doing, I believe there were around 60 kids that were participating in that program. 60 in that program. We had Farm to Fork. There were, I think, about 8 kids that participated in that. I can get you total numbers. But again, there's two components to what we do in the summer with children. One is mandatory and required by federal law. We call it the Extended School Year Program. It's for children with disabilities. We are not messing with that.
Correct.
This is that kind of goes beyond that. This has benefit to all kids. And I would, put it out there too. This will have an impact on our ESY programming, because our children with disabilities, it's really important for them to have exposure and opportunity with their typical peers. So even though we're not looking at the ESY budget, it certainly will impact that program as well.
Got it.
And again, I think what I'm looking for is some direction with the board. There is some decision-making and judgment that can occur in terms of if we knew there was a dollar amount you're looking at. I'm providing you hypotheticals, knowing that, you know, between now and the time the warrant is set, things can change about how we expend some of these funds. So there's definitely room in here for us to make decisions further down the road.
I have questions on more of these.
Yeah.
You have, under the 300,000, you have elimination of elementary Spanish program. Do we actually have Spanish right now in the elementary school? Because
So
I'm hearing otherwise.
we do not, in terms of, we have not been able to fill those positions. We have 2 positions that are not full-time. One is, I think, a .8, and the other one is a .5, so a half-time position. Neither of those positions have been filled. Elementary school Spanish, or world language in general, is very, very difficult to fill even at full-time. And so there's sort of a placeholder in the master schedule. If we were to identify a Spanish teacher, we don't have one right now, and that's why you know, I would propose that if we're looking to do a $300,000 cut, which is significant, we have to talk about cutting personnel at $300,000. And if we're going to do that, then I think we should start by having a conversation about Spanish at the elementary school.
How long have we had these 2 positions open with nobody applying?
Since the beginning of last school year, I believe.
So now we're in the 2nd year.
This is the 2nd year those positions are being filled.
Have we had anybody apply, or is it we haven't got people that would?
I'd have to look. All I know is that we have not necessarily had anyone qualified apply.
Okay.
My other 2 questions are down under the $500,000. You have in here for HGS cubbies and tables, and then library bookshelves for middle school. So I'm wondering how necessary those are right now? Like the HMS bookshelves, didn't we just redo the library and get all new furniture in there? So I'm surprised to see bookshelves in here.
Yeah, and I can get additional information about specific items. Really what you're looking at here is this exercise involved with me meeting with directors and principals, having conversations, first and foremost about personnel, and but then asking them to provide a more detailed list of items that they had put in the operating budget that, you know, we could look to reduce. So I can certainly get more information.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just look at some of those things, and I think there's some things that obviously we cannot take out. And then there's some things that maybe could be deferred, so just want to look at that.
With that, though, like, I feel like they're very good at setting a good schedule for when things need to be replaced. And if we push it back a year, we're pushing something back another year and then something back another year. Like, I feel like overall, it's very reasonable what they put through. And like, this budget is really tight from my experience. So I thought the budget was in a really good place, and I don't really see anything on here that I'm comfortable with cutting.
Yeah, I mean, in regard, just Aaron, like the HCS cubbies and tables, and in going through the budget discussions with Dr. Cheney, you know, in the library over there, like, that was something that, you know, one of the classrooms didn't have. They just don't have cubbies, so there's like no storage. So it's one of those things where it looks like it's something that doesn't matter or that we could do without, but when you really look at the picture of what that looks like in a day-to-day classroom, to not have cubbies, to not have a space to put backpacks, then you realize the impact that
Right.
that has.
Okay, yeah, I mean, like, so that's a good answer, because I wasn't part of that
Exactly.
conversation, right,
exactly.
so. I'll stop
See,
picking it apart now.
I see Mr. Gerard doing some numbers. Want to see if he's got something.
No, I mean, if we were to somehow find a way to reduce the budget by 168 grand, that changes the percent change from 5.46 to under 5. It takes away some of the things that I'm not comfortable eliminating. I don't want to see the Summer Learning Academy get impacted in any capacity. I think we've made some good grounds there from utilizing that, especially with our test scores. And I think if we reduce some of that, it's going to have a negative impact on our test scores and some of our students, and I'm not comfortable with that. However, to Mrs. Pellegrini's point, you know, we're looking at, I mean, you said $28,000 for the overall summer learning program, and those two lines with the cubbies and tables and the bookshelves represents $14,000, almost the same cost as the other one. And if we can't fill the Spanish program teacher, then let's cut that position versus eliminating other things that we have in place that we can do, that if we eliminate, it's going to negatively impact the students. If, again, 168 grand, I know it's not one of the 100, the 300, the 500s that we discussed. It's still a reduction. It gets us below 5% with the new numbers that we have. I'm a little bit more comfortable with that as long as it doesn't impact the students greatly.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out too that I believe, you know, I was tasked with engaging in this process because there was some consideration that we would be adding a building project to our operating budget. And I would say that, you know, now that we're not doing that, you know, our operating budget is up 5.46%. When you look at area towns and their preliminary budgets, that's not unreasonable. And I would say that every item on this list has an impact to our operations, whether it's the condition of our buildings, whether it's our staffing, and even the Spanish program. You will recall that we did not have any additional impact to the budget this year when we added the 4th grade teacher, because we're utilizing some of the funding from Spanish to do that. So even if you kept it in the budget, the goal would be to fill the Spanish position for next year. But if we weren't able to do that, it also gives us the flexibility for unanticipated staffing needs that come up. So I would caution us not just to cut it because it's not filled. And that's even true with if you look at support staff position for $55,000. We have open support staff positions, but the conversation we should be having is not should we cut it. It really should be how do we fill it, because there's such an instructional need. We had the student achievement data presentation at a previous meeting, and we talked about, you know, how do we improve our outcomes for students? We do that through our support staff. They're the backbone of this organization. So I wouldn't even be in favor of even looking at that. So this is just my commentary.
Yeah, for me, you'd look at the 100,000, you know, adjustment insurance and benefits. We'll just end up having to take it out of somewhere else if that goes too high. Roof replacement. If there's an issue with the roof and there's a leak or there has to be repair, that means more money and downtime for educational services for whoever's underneath that. Lawnmower, you're putting your personnel at risk using an old lawnmower. Administration, laptop replacement means you downtime. Summer Learning Academy is awesome. Our summer program is ridiculously good. It's better than almost anybody else. Like, I don't think that goes anywhere. Coder Z license, like computer programming is something kids need. Split library computer lab, you're talking about, again, taking away tech from the kids, which they're going to need later on. Staff laptop replacement. Yeah. If you have a teacher that a laptop goes down, you're losing instructional time and you're aggravating the crap out of the teachers, which means you may not retain teachers, which is, like, for me, the number one priority. Again, Summer Learning Academy and the elementary Spanish position. I want our kids to have access to multiple languages, and Bob's ability and the ability of the district to pull in teachers, I feel like that will eventually get filled. And then anything below that, like, You have to trust your administration and your school district. It's there for a reason because they feel like they really need it. So anything on that side to me, even though it looks not necessarily important to me, obviously it's important to them for a reason.
And I'll just say, I appreciate you going through that difficult exercise. I know this was not easy. I know you had a lot of conversations, a lot of probably difficult conversations of what these schools are willing to give up, or if they had to. And I'm kind of relieved to see how bad 500,000 looks, how grim the picture actually looks if we were to go in that direction. Exactly what we would lose. This is what I wanted to see personally of how bad it would actually look if we actually went in this direction. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the exercise as well, and obviously, just doing my due diligence, asking those questions, so.
So I'm probably on the opposite side of most of this. When I look at, I'm going to pick on the Spanish program right quick. We have two positions, 0.8 and a 0.5. We haven't had it for either position. In my mind, why would we have the 0.5 at all? That right there, to me, is something I would say, why are we still carrying that? If in the future we see that we get the 0.8, we get somebody to fill that one position we do think it should be in the curriculum, and then there's additional support needed, then we address that at that time. And if I look at, that's a 1.3 as far as a head count, $120,000, so that right there is $50,000. So there's a reduction right there. And I don't see that as a negative impact because, we've talked in the past that one teacher or 0.8 should be able to handle most of this.
I see your perspective there. I would feel comfortable if we went with a 0.8 FTE and got rid of the 0.5.
I see that there's others that, $20,000 adjustment insurance and benefits. For me, I could say, yeah, I could feel, if they're comfortable enough to put it on paper to say we could do that, then I'd be, for me, I'm like, okay, we should strive to take some of this out of the budgets this year, especially this year right now. So I would like to see some challenges here. And I understand, I'll tell you right now, there's ones that I would strike out immediately. I would never be in favor for under the 500,000. I would not be in favor for the middle school teacher or the support staff. If somebody came to me with that, we've grown in the central school by 50 students in the last 2 years. They're going to need that support staff. We're not going to need those teachers. That's not going away.
And I can't tell you, David, you can't hear it right now, but there are people watching at home who have just collectively sighed.
Yeah,
because of what you just said. And so that really is appreciated because, this is people's livelihoods, right? So the commitment by the board that you're not interested in cutting or the positions or people losing their
We
jobs.
have more kids in the district right now over the last 2 years, so that would make no sense to cut the positions we need to staff. Right. It does, in my mind. Somebody else can come to me and explain why that would make sense. That one doesn't make sense to me.
That's not even a consideration in
Right.
my perspective. Right. I'm looking at bookshelves like that. I'm not sure but we need staff. That's not even, wouldn't have, those would be the first things I would cross off.
And just to provide a little data, if there was direction in terms of reducing the 0.5 Spanish, that's a savings of $46,178. I also heard you mention, David, the $20,000 adjustment in insurance and benefits. So if that were added to that, that is $66,178.
Right. And honestly, what Jason was saying earlier about getting near or under that 5%, I would want us to get close to that because having the big, and again, I don't try to measure ourselves to other districts too much. Whatever they are. But I would like to see us get a little bit more leaner on there. I mean, truth be told, if you look at our numbers every year, and I know we want to be between 3 and 6% under budget, we are consistently 5% or more under budget.
Yeah, for me,
So that's where I'm at with this.
for me, like, going down from getting rid of the 5 and going to the .8, it makes more sense for me to go to just a 1 full-time position. Because if you have somebody that they're looking for positions and there's a .8 and a 1, you just lost that person, they're gonna go to the 1.
Agreed.
And then, yeah, I'd like to keep the 20,000, but I'm okay for the insurance benefits. But like, as far as like the 5% or the not 5%, like, I understand the value of that number and being under that number, but that's public relations versus operations. The reality is, if our main concern is high quality instruction, and there's things in this budget that our staff feels the need that we need in there, that to me is a bigger concern than the 5%. But I definitely understand the value of that.
I mean, I think you were just talking last board meeting, you saw a 6 for the first time. There's a lot of people that are seeing 6s and 7s and whatever that, whatever those numbers are. So that's why we be cognizant of this to, financial stewards here. So.
More than $1,000 for my project. I actually thought I would see, and I know that stuff, but yeah.
So, I think it's, as a board, again, majority of what directionally do we want to give to Bob and to the staff or to the administration, et cetera. What do we think?
Do you think it would, if you're going from 8.5, would you rather go to 1 full or a 0.8? Do you think that would make a big difference or not?
So it's a difficult question to answer. It has a very long explanation. There's a reason why the positions have been structured. Some of it has to do with schedule. Some of it has to do with salary and benefits. There's a reason why we have the position as a 0.8 and a 0.5. So it's not as simple as saying, let's just make it a 1.0. Okay. And honestly, Dr. Hubner, that was the original conversation I think I had when I came to the district and had conversation with our CFO. So there's a complicating factor. If there was some consideration, it would be to look at either the 0.8 or the 0.5. And obviously, we would have to restructure what the program's going to look like based upon the availability of staff, the number of hours they work, the master schedule. And obviously, any reduction, it's not going to be the same program that it was when it was running.
So that 0.2 may not be as helpful as, yeah, that makes sense.
Looking for more input from the board if we want to give Ms. Thompson direction.
Like I said, I'd be comfortable with eliminating the 0.5 and gaining the $46,000. I don't know how others feel about that.
Looking for input from Aaron, Jason?
I mean, if we have the 0.5 and the 0.8 and we fill 1, we're still in a better position. If we just have the 0.8, I guess that limits the optionality, and if the money's going to end up coming back if it doesn't get filled, I like the versatility of it, but I understand where you're going for.
I mean, for me, I don't, again, it's easy for me to say out loud, but, harder in practice. I don't see it's a huge putt to get to $100,000. If you pick some of these things, and staying away from the staff reductions for sure, I think there's some other things here that we could get to that 100,000. I think that this is part of what our job is to do, is to make those hard decisions and hard discussions. So I would challenge that we can get to a number like that and not impact the, I'm going to say the students. So to your point, coders, I wouldn't see that being cut. But I think that there are things here that we could look at and say, I'm going to throw them out loud. I wouldn't want to do move the roof replacement out. I'll say that also. We've seen that where we've tried to do that before, and then we have plastic on the library covering the books because we have the roof leaking. That's happened the last 2 years. Now, typically it happens with a flat roof where you have the creases right there, but still, there's reasons why we need to do this maintenance. But there's things like the lawnmowers, can we go another year? You know, stuff like that, I would challenge areas that does it make sense or not. So that's my input, but
So I agree with reducing the 446,000 for the special, the Spanish teacher. The 20 grand for the adjustment in insurance, that brings us to 66. Is there potential, and this would probably be a good question for Mr. Mackey, is there potential to just remove or delay the mini split in the library computer lab by 1 year? It's a $35,000 charge. That gets us to the $100,000. That reduces us by 100 grand. I know this was an exercise based on putting in funding for the addition, and we're taking that out as of tonight. But I think those 3 lines saves us $100,000 and lowers that impact on the town. I'd like to see what that looks like and what Mr. Mackey thinks about that and what the impact is.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with him today. And, you know, because it's challenging, because when you look at reducing instructional impact, what does that usually mean? It's going to have more impact on your custodial budget. And so I appreciate, you know, he was asked to make some pretty significant cuts for the overall size of his budget. And I basically said to him, you know, prioritize for me. Like, he was comfortable deferring on the mower, the AC, and the roof replacement. But I said, we're not going to throw that all in the 100,000. We're going to spread it out between 100 and 300. And I think that, you know, he had identified the deferring the roof replacement and based upon a number of factors, including recent rainstorms they've gotten and the integrity of the roof. So this is what he is recommending as a person who runs that department, saying this is what he thinks. You know, if the board, you know, has an opinion or wants to, you know, move AC up, we can certainly do that. You know, but, you know, I do trust that his assessment of what needs to be prioritized is pretty accurate, but that doesn't mean we can't make adjustments to that.
He's done a phenomenal job since he's been in the district. There won't be any questioning that, and definitely trust his judgment on it. I just think that question might be just the right question to ask. Get us to that $100,000 mark between those 3 line items, and then I'd feel a lot more comfortable moving forward.
And I do feel, if we want to try to move the conversation along, I do feel like I have enough information here based upon this conversation to move forward with a $100,000 reduction that can be that would be brought to the board for the next meeting, and I can give you that list of the things I've heard loud and clear. It should not impact our current staffing, with the exception of maybe that 0.5 plus position. There's maybe further conversation that needs to occur about maintenance priorities. I'm comfortable with the $20,000 adjustment in insurance and benefits. We have a CFO who's very conservative in his estimates. He's not going to let that $20,000 go and put us at risk. So I'm comfortable with that. And then I would just want to go back to our directors and principals and say, all right, help me get to that $100,000 mark. So if the board's comfortable with $100,000, I can certainly deliver that for the next meeting.
Yep.
consensus, all right? Yep. And then at the next meeting is when we have to finalize the budget. That'll go forward in the warrant article, so.
Not to make it super challenging for you.
I
And
love a challenge,
I know
Jake.
starting off
He's
that way
doing
is
all
not
sorts of
good.
math over
Yeah.
here. I was just watching.
Would it be possible to come up with maybe 3 game plans? This is
I thought that's what I did for tonight.
option A at 100,000, option B at 100,000, option C, and then that way there we have, as a board, some options to choose from that we can all agree on.
I can certainly do that. You know, also keep in mind that, you know, generally speaking with the budget, you're really voting on that bottom line. And here's a great example. So we defer on the lawnmower, and guess what? In April, the lawnmower breaks. We're buying a lawnmower. And this does happen. Like, we could move forward, but like, no, you know what? The roof was in much better shape than we thought. We really need to defer. So there's always this adjustment that occurs, even in the current, like, we're making kind of those decisions right now, but I can certainly do that if you would like me to bring here's what we definitely should move forward with, and here's some sort of an a la carte option of some items that for consideration.
It's no different than at our homes. I mean, you know, we might plan to do a roof repair, but all of a sudden our
Yeah.
septic fails. Well, we're not doing the roof repair, we're
Yeah.
gonna keep it for a year, another year, we'd move into septic, you know. So we do this at our homes all the time, so we expect that you and your team's gonna do that, you know, shift things around as needed. So, appreciate it.
And the other thing I should have mentioned at the beginning, and people hear me say this a lot, all the things that we're talking about are on the website. There's buttons on the very front page. You can click on there. You can see the documents we're discussing. And so if anyone has any questions or wants more information about any of the items we discussed, please
Yep.
reach out.
All right. Sounds good. Anything else from anyone before we move on? All right. Next up is the draft warrant articles review. Again, we'll review this to start to form up our warrant articles. That would be part of our typical process coming to January, February, and ultimately the voting in March. So let's just read it. So some of these we may want to take action tonight, board members, or we can just have considerations and discussions, and then the voting can actually be done at our next meeting. So some of these we could take vote on. So it's up to us as we go through this. All right? So, got my backup glasses here, so a little harder for me to read here. All right. So I'm going to go right through them and read them line by line for those at home and to make sure, you know, any questions. So again, this is for the first session of the annual meeting deliberative. You're hereby notified to meet at the Hampstead Middle School, 28 School Street, Hampstead, New Hampshire, on Tuesday, the 6th of February, 2024 at 7 p.m. The session shall consist of an explanation, discussion, and debate of warrant articles 2 through X, depending on how many warrant articles we have. Warrant articles may be amended subject to the following limitations. Warrant articles whose wording is prescribed by law shall not be amended. Warrant articles that are amended shall be placed on the official ballot for the final vote on the main motion as amended. And C, no warrant article shall be amended to eliminate the subject matter of the article. An amendment that changes the dollar amount of an appropriation in a warrant article does not violate this provision. Second session of the annual meeting, voting on warrant articles 1 through X will be conducted by official ballot to be held in conjunction with the town meeting voting to be held on Tuesday, the 12th day of March 2024 at the middle school, 28 School Street, Hampstead, New Hampshire. Polls will be open from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. So that's just more notification of 2 of the major milestones in February and then in March. All right. So for Article 1, election of officers, we will have 2 3-year terms that are up for anyone who is going to continue to run or any new members of the public that want to run for school board. So that's 2 3-year terms. All right, Article 2, the operating budget. As we talked about, we will not finalize this tonight, but for those that there will be an Article 2 for the operating budget. Shall the voters of Hampstead School District raise and appropriate an operating budget, not including appropriations of special warrant articles and all other appropriations voted separately? The amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant for the purposes set forth herein, totaling whatever that budget amount is. Should the article be defeated, the operating budget shall be X. That would be the default budget, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by provision and action of the Hampstead School District by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013X and XVI. To take up the issue of a revised operating budget only, note, warrant Article 2, operating budget does not include appropriations proposed under any other warrant articles. I don't think there's any question on that one from anyone. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, capital reserve fund, I think we, we've talked about that we most likely will want to do something here. So Article 3 will be on the capital reserve fund. Shall the voters of Hampstead School District raise and appropriate up to X dollars to be placed in the school renovation, reconstruction, and capital improvement capital reserve established in 2006, with such amount to be transferred from June 30th, 2022 unassigned fund balance surplus in excess of $150,000 available for transfer on July 1. Majority vote required. Again, as a note, the first $150,000 of surplus would be returned to taxpayers. Then the next X amount of dollars, depending on what we would vote on, of the surplus will be placed in the capital reserve fund. Any additional surplus will be returned to the taxpayers. The funds from this article will come from the 2023 to 2024 school budget surplus, not from additional taxes. Recommended by the school board depending on. So, school board members, I don't know if you want to bring up what you would think is a good number and discuss that?
So last year we did $1 million. We're using that money to get potentially 2 classrooms this year, and we're going to deplete that fund. Based on the projections that Mr. Dowd gave to us tonight, I would recommend, my own personal opinion, I'd recommend asking for $1 million again in surplus. Now that's going to be a challenge based on what he gave us. If we were able to do the $1 million, and based on Mr. Dowd's projections, and understand that these are projections, that would put $1 million in capital reserve, and then it would return $404,000 approximately. Again, projections, just to make sure everybody at home is clear, but that would return $404,000 back to the town. I'd feel comfortable with that, because we're going to need to build up that savings account again if we're going to do anything else in the future.
I feel like keeping the same as last year. I think that's smart and deliverable.
Yep.
I agree.
I mean, for me, it's getting us to get that 30% back from the state. And in order to do that, we need to make sure we have the funds available when it's available. Because it's not a matter of if, but when we'd have that, because we are now ranked 2 or 3 higher than we were. And when that's available, as Mr. Thompson said, we have 3 years from that point to have a project go through. So, yes, it's $1 million, but it's also an investment to get 30% back, whatever that looks like, when that looks like it.
30% is $2.46 million.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's depending on the size of the project. I
Yep.
mean, that's for a future board to decide what that project would look like. But whatever that is, you know, it's a chunk of change that comes back to the voters. So, yeah. I mean, you know, we still haven't discussed other things that we know are going to happen, which is we know we have a septic that's almost, 40 years old, I think we said. That's eventually going to fail. We know that's somewhere between, as of, I'm going to say last year's dollars, $400,000 to $500,000 based on estimates to replace it. So right there is a chunk of change that we should, almost always have in the back pocket, or, available to us. Because that will happen. Most septics, they don't go 50, 60, 70 years. Luckily, ours is looking pretty good, so we've been able to extend the life of it, but there's things there. It's not just about the addition. There are major,
Well, the
items.
roof is a great example, right? We can take it out of the operating budget, knowing that if there is some sort of failure with the roof, we do have funds available through capital reserve that we could utilize for that replacement. And sometimes that actually plays into some of the decisions that we're making when we have to look at cuts.
Right. So we do have big dollar items we always have to take care of.
Yep.
I don't want to run into like a certain other district that had to come up with $75 million to cover a lot of things that they deferred maintenance. These are things that do and have happened. So, yeah. So I don't know. Other input?
I would agree with that.
All right. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, if this was something we want to align to tonight and we want to vote on that, we can, correct, to move forward on a warrant article?
Yes, if the intent
Then-
is to start to build the warrant, yes.
Yep. So, would you like to make the motion, Mr. Giard?
Sure. Go ahead and make the motion to request $1 million be added to the capital reserve for Article 3 for the upcoming warrant.
Second.
Second by Dr. Hubner. All approved? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, so that's Capital Reserve Fund, that's Article 3, so we'll move on to Article 4, which is the general acceptance of reports. Shall the Hampstead School District accept reports of agents, auditors, and committees as written in the 2023? That's a general one we don't really vote on. That recommendation comes later on, so there's not much for us to do
Correct.
there. We will need I guess it would be Article 5, utilize capital reserve for the 2 classrooms. We can get the exact dollar amount. I know we have it. It's 1.5 something million. If you've got that, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I do. Just give me 1 second. The two-class infill only would be $1,524,000.
So that one right there, we'll move forward to get that on our warrant article as well.
And just to clarify, Chairman Smith, I
Yes.
don't think that necessarily would be Article 5. I think the general acceptance of reports is usually the last.
Okay,
So
That's-
just a
good point.
Point
Yep.
of clarification there.
Thank you, Melissa. So I guess on that one, we should vote on that. So I'll do a motion for a warrant article for capital reserve of 1.524 million for the 2 classrooms utilizing capital reserve. Second by Mr. Giard. All approved? All right. I don't know if we have any other warrant articles that we'd even be considering right now, but that's typically nothing else. So, anything, all right. So I think unless there's any questions on warrant articles under G, we'll move on. Okay. Actually, before we do this, I should just remind everybody that some of the key milestone dates coming up. So give me 1 second so I can read this a little bit better. So once we finalize the warrant articles, there are a number of activities that will happen in January. I'm going to highlight a few of these. I'm not going to go through every single item right now, but going through here, January 2nd, there will be a public notice of the school board budget and bond hearings. So that'll be done on or before Tuesday, January 2nd. If there's any citizen petitions for bond articles, they must be submitted by the Friday before the second Tuesday in January by 5 p.m. Let's see. We will have a public hearing on the proposed budget. That will be on Tuesday, January 9th. Down a few more here. The filing period, the first day of filing period for candidates to continue as board members or to file to be a new board member starts on Wednesday, January 24th of next year. Let's see. We'll post warrants and budget for session 1 and session 2 by Monday, January 29th. On February 2nd, I believe that's Groundhog Day, is the last day of filing period for candidates who are looking to become board members or continue as board members. Again, February 6th, we have our deliberative session 1, which again is about the warrant articles. And then as we go down, the next big milestone would be Tuesday, March 12th, which is the actual district voting, or AKA session 2 here at the middle school. All of those that we talked about, the public hearing, the deliberative session 1 and deliberative in the session 2, the district voting will be here at the middle school. Anything I missed or anything anybody wants to add to that?
Did we make a decision on the school day on voting day, March 12th?
So March 12th is a professional development day, so there is no school on that day.
It's the other voting day that I think Mr. Thompson might speak to. Primary day. Yep. All right. Anything else from anyone? All right. We're going to go on to the grant funding. So, Mr. Thompson,
Yeah,
provide
so
a summary.
just to recap, at the previous board meeting, you asked that I provide a sort of summary and overview of the grant funding that we have received for this school year. So I've asked our sit-in CFO tonight, our Director of Student Services, Jessica Parsons, to just do a brief presentation on the funds. This presentation is available on our website for review, and we welcome any questions or input people have about any of our grant funding. So I'll turn it over to Jess.
Thank you. One thing I want to know, and it's linked, our assurances and the GEPA listed there are just our federal documents that we have to complete with the state to basically verify that we're doing all of the federal programs and meeting the requirements of those programs in order to access this funding. And so, as you can see, we just gave kind of a quick list of the amount of allocation rewarded for the 23-24 school year. I'll go in a little bit more in depth into what each grant can be utilized for. But as you can see, overall, our total federal grant funding this year is $385,520. In addition to that, we have been awarded a 2-year grant. That'll be $7,500 both years. And then at the end there, we still want to just list that our ESSER funding, that started out at $427,000. That has been, that continues to be spent down. And so as we get actuals each month for what was actually spent versus what's budgeted for in the grant, then we continue to utilize that funding, which is what has been helpful in funding Summer Learning Academy. But knowing that this grant ends the end of September, we are spending it down, and so really we're just looking at what wasn't fully allocated or spent, and we're utilizing that leftover funding. So our Title I funding this year is a little over $28,000. This is a significant decrease in the past, and we've seen a pattern of that overall in the state for Title I funding. This obviously impacts our Title I programming because this is where we utilize funds for Title I staffing, summer programming, and training improvements in the areas of reading and math. And so because we've had a decrease in that funding, it's important to note that those RTI paraprofessionals and those support paraprofessionals are really important to the work that we do in terms of providing interventions for students. And so we're thankful for you guys recognizing that in kind of that budget exercise. But this provides opportunities for children to acquire the knowledge and skills to meet state proficiency standards, so we can recognize if kids are not necessarily performing at grade level, that this title funding can help support that through a variety of programs we develop. Our Title II funding was a little over $33,000 this year, and this provides opportunity for teacher improvement, preparedness, and professional development, which you will note, there wasn't a ton of that written into our operating budget because we really, Nicole kind of focuses her work with this grant, and she really utilizes every penny to make sure our staff get access to professional development opportunities, and ones that are really rich and provide us opportunities to have some more progressive options within our classrooms. So our Title IV funding is a little over $20,000, and this is to help provide students with access to a well-rounded education. So we utilize these funds to support students during MTSS A and B blocks. We utilize it for software, and we utilize it to help our teachers differentiate instructional practices and just help to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And this is just kind of an overview of in the September of 2021 through September of 2024, we've had we'll have the opportunity to expend the ESSER funds, and so we've utilized it for Summer Learning Academy for the 22, 23, and potentially we may be utilizing some of the funding depending on where we shake out in the budget for if we have leftovers for this coming school, summer. We've used it to increase communication within the schools with radios. We used it for connection coaching. And so this was just to really help to offset some of the gaps that were created through COVID.
And maybe in a future board meeting, if we can see where we are with that as far as what's left.
Yep, I can get actuals.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. And so IDEA, this is the grant that I primarily manage, and we did have an increase this year, obviously because as our needs increase and our the number of students identified in our district with needs, they typically try to increase the funding. This funding source was ultimately in place when IDEA came out in 2004. Unfortunately, they have still not been able to fully fund special education programming, and so this is their kind of funding to us for a mandated program, but that this is the funding that we get basically for unanticipated costs that may come up throughout the year, where we may need to buy materials, curriculum, programming, equipment for a student if the need arises, or any additional testing materials that might pop up if we need to test a student in an area that we hadn't previously purchased that testing. We can use it for contracted providers if we need, if all of a sudden there's a need in the district that we hadn't budgeted for, again, an unanticipated cost, we can utilize the funds for that. Technology and professional development for staff, because some of our staff's needs are professional development needs may be unique to the disability, and so we may need to look at providing additional professional development outside of what we provide for all of our teachers.
Just something that we've talked about, and probably last year, maybe a little longer than last year, was that, and I don't know if we can get access to these numbers still or not, but that average of districts, that students that are utilizing student services is about 15 to 16% on average. In our district, we're at like 20 to 22%.
Yeah, so I will get back to you with those actuals. I do think the state average increased significantly over the last couple of years, and it's closer to, I think, 17% the last time I looked. But yeah, you're right. We're, the school percentages are a little bit different, but yeah, we're averaging somewhere between 20 and 23%. And it's growing, for sure.
That's why I think it's important that when we talk about, it's growing, it's not just saying that, that's a vague thing, but if we can, communicate that it's like 1 out of every 5 students, just over 1 out of every 5 students is getting student services. So this is why something like this is important to help, cover that. Okay.
And I have to say, I'm fairly stingy with the money because I want to make sure that we have it available should a really large unanticipated cost come in. If a student comes in that requires significant programming outside of our district, and I didn't budget for it because you can't anticipate that, and we are already kind of getting low on that budget source, then I could potentially utilize that for that. And the same with contracted services. So I'm always kind of stingy about how I use it, but making sure, and then there are times where I'll use it and then we may not have to necessarily use all the contracted services because I want to make sure that we utilize this funding before it expires.
Right. Okay.
The next grant is the Robotics Fund grant. This is not a federal grant. This is something that Nicole worked with a staff member at Central School to apply for, and we've actually we've been awarded the $7,500 this year and next year as well, and that will cover the expenses to begin an elementary robotics program. That'll include kits, parts and tools, transportation to events and competitions, and then obviously they need a coach and an advisor, so that would fund the cost of that. But we're really excited about kicking off this robotics program. And I think it goes along with what you guys are asking us, is to continue to find innovative ways and experiential opportunities for our students to learn.
Yeah, and the other one that we added this year was the technology. So it hits a few of the goals that we have as a district, so this is good.
So as always, under the federal grant piece, anyone in the community should have questions or suggestions regarding the usage of our federal grants or grant funding. Please contact Nicole Tomaselli. We left her email up there, but she is happy to take any suggestions from the community around our grant funding.
And all these are on our website, so if anybody ever wants to see what our total is as it increases, more grants, we do have it off of our homepage. Okay. Questions, anyone?
No, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. Next up is our financial audit report.
Yeah, so I can speak to this a little bit, and I know Mr. Dowd is on the line. So we had indicated earlier in the fall that we were in the process of completing the 2022-2023 audit report. This would get us all up to date with all of the audits that have been previously discussed over the last year. To date, the field work has been done. There's correspondence that has gone back between the auditors and the business office regarding just some additional documents, but we are prepared to receive the preliminary report shortly. I think originally, the reason why it's on the agenda tonight is that we had anticipated that we may have the report by now. But just given the thoroughness of the work that they do, we don't have that yet. But we will get it shortly. So
that's appreciative, because this will be the first audit report we have on time, on a typical schedule that we expect. To be honest, I mean, a lot of work in the past, but this is the first one, and since I've been a board member, I think that we're getting it this close to the close of a book.
Yeah,
so
it
appreciate
is.
the work and the diligence.
I understand, like the previous conversations that we've had about the audit reports. The business, the individuals that work in our business office under the leadership of Jeff, to get the audits up to date where we are today, it just speaks to how hard folks have worked to get us where we need to be. So I'm really appreciative of the work that they've done, so.
Yep, agreed. Good, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. All right, we're going to get into policy committee. We have 4 policies for first reading. I'll walk through some of the changes or what these are about. Board members, first reading, ask any questions as we go through this. The first one is on EG, district communications. This is a policy we currently don't have on the books right now, but this is really just I look at this like the one pager that if we have a communication plan of any type of event, this says where to go to for those communications. So it's brand new. If anybody has any questions, but if we look at the very first page of this, it talks about what contents will be in the communication plan for the goals, implementation, communications to stakeholders, internal and external, that will have a crisis communication plan. And again, you'll see some of these, but not all of these reference other policies. So this is just a collection, again, of those extended policies for really a one-pager of where to go to for what we expect as a district to have in place.
And so for me to understand, we want to have something set up so the community, if there's something weird and strange going on, they can go and say and look, and this is what is expected for communications back out from the district.
Yeah, essentially this is sort of outlines the steps that the district takes, both in crisis communication, general communications, to communicate with the stakeholders, the general public. And this is, born out of some statutory changes and just the ongoing need for public schools in general, including Hampstead, to just do a better job communicating with stakeholders. So, and as of right now, there is, when we have to develop plans consistently across the state, we try to come up with templates so that school districts are using similar plans. Pinkerton's a good example. Pinkerton would be required to do this as well. It'd be good if we would have a similar plan as well. So that is in the early stages of development.
Yep. So, all right, any other questions, comments on policy EG? All right, policy KDA, Public Information Program. Again, this one's being repealed, so there's really no change to this. And it's being repealed in conjunction with EG that we just talked about. So that's why it's being repealed. EBCC bomb threats. This is one that's on the books for revisions, and it's amending it per RSA 644:3. So if you want to take a few minutes to read over this, you'll see where we've added information. So that it's not just about a bomb threat, bomb, active shooter, false alarms, and any other such threats. Definition of a threat.
And the board may recall that the previous school year in the state of New Hampshire, there were districts that were dealing with false alarms where an individual believed to be from outside the state of New Hampshire was calling local police departments claiming that there was an active shooter incident in a school. And so much of the language in this policy is to address the concerns raised from that issue last year regarding active shooter false alarms.
Yep. Any questions on that? All right. Next one, EB Joint Loss Management Committee. Again, this one is one that was last revised in 2015. Not much more to say. If everybody wants to take a look at this one, this is just one that's on the books that has some revisions. Again, if you read through it, a lot that's been stricken from the policy, but then it just outlines workplace safety program, joint loss management committee. Again, in accordance with New Hampshire Department of Labor rules. pretty standard language on this one. So, any questions about EB Joint Loss Management Committee or any of the others?
I'll make a motion to accept all 4 policies
Vote for first reading.
for first reading.
You want to amend that a little bit?
I would like to make a motion to accept all 4 policies on first reading.
Perfect. I'll second that motion. Any questions, discussion? All approved? All right. There we go. All right. Everybody's favorite part, board comments, correspondence. Mr. Giard? Ms. Pellegrini?
I'm just going to put in a little plug for the PTSA. December 13th is their Jingle Bell Shop, and so kids love it. It's a great event. They need volunteers, and they need donations, so please consider donating and volunteering.
And this weekend, they have at the Central School, is it this weekend? Santa breakfast?
Oh, yeah, that's this week. That's not PTSA, though.
No.
That's Mother's Club.
Mother's Club at
Yeah.
the Central School has the pancake breakfast with Santa and a bunch of other things. It's always great for the kids and families. My other board correspondence is last board meeting I mentioned that at the winter meeting at Pinkerton there was going to be a meeting with the school board chairs. They have reached out to me. It looks like it'll be January 16th or 17th that they'll want to bring the board chairs together at Pinkerton to talk about any contract language that we want to standardize. So I would like to ask that Mr. Thompson has maybe Mr. Dowd send us, the board members, the latest contract with Pinkerton, and in the future board meetings we can do a non-public about anything that we want to address. Would that work? Because we have we really have only one board meeting between now and the January 16th or 17th meeting that would be with Pinkerton. So I'd want to make sure I'm representing for the board members anything that we want to bring up. From that meeting, we'll bring it back to anything that we may need to vote on that would be contract modifications. So that's the intent of that meeting. All right, that's all I got. Mr. Ferris.
Just wanted to highlight, I'm personally organizing a Christmas Carol crew. It's going to be on December 23rd from 4 to 8 p.m. More things to come via social media, but it's through the Civic Club, and I've secured a bus, so we'll drive around and sing Christmas carols all around town. It's going to be awesome.
We get a volunteer in the audience. All right, Doctor?
Something that came up at my school was the afternoon of Thanksgiving break. There was a few students that missed the bus because they weren't aware when the bus was coming in. They often ask when the bus is coming in, and I keep telling them to add the First Student app so that they can track the buses and when they may come in. And especially with it getting colder and some students that don't necessarily dress for the weather, I think if we can send something out about the First Student app as a blast, I think that would be helpful for the kids, for the parents, and for administrators that get stuck until 4:30 on the day of the break.
Oh, that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Haubner. All right, moving on over to the consent agenda.
So there is no personnel report this evening. Looking at superintendent report, I just wanted to highlight a couple of really quick items. I did have the opportunity last week to attend the recycled percussion assembly, Chaos and Kindness, and I said to Mrs. Milbury after the assembly, that was the best middle school assembly I've ever been to, and that's really hard for me to say, because as a middle school principal, I had some really good assemblies. But it's not just the drums and the rhythm, the messaging, the excitement of the students in the audience. They did this activity where if you shot a free throw, they gave you they picked a couple of kids and they give you $50 if you're able to land a free throw. We had 2 students do it. To see the joy and jubilation in these 2 students who won $50 in front of, all of their peers, it was just really neat. And it speaks volumes, as Mrs. Milbury said, to just the work. We have these student groups that work really hard to make this school the best place that it can be, so I appreciate that. Also, I sent out a communication to parents today. You know, tis the season, you know, inclement weather's coming. I'm hoping we don't have any snow days so we can get out as early as possible in June. But we're going to continue to utilize a combination of traditional snow days and some remote days. I admit I'm a big fan of snow days. There's something to be said about getting outside and building snowmen and sledding. But there's also, I'm a big fan of not going to school in July. So, you know, we will do a combination of both. I recognize that remote days are tough on parents, they're tough on teachers. So we will utilize remote days selectively, really as a way to not extend the school year any more than we need to. So the first inclement weather event, parents don't have to worry, that will be a traditional snow day. But as the year creeps on, if we have a significant number of days that we would be looking to make up, we would move to more remote days. I did have a conversation with Pinkerton, who indicated that based upon their calendar, they're looking to do mostly, if not all, remote days. It's a little easier with the older kids, but just so folks are aware, that does seem to be the direction Pinkerton will be moving. And then lastly, last Tuesday evening, I had the opportunity to attend the Late Start Committee at Pinkerton as the district's representative. Again, Pinkerton is exploring and in the research phase of starting their day later. They currently start at 7:15. We have data that suggests it's the earliest start time of any high school that we're aware of in the state of New Hampshire. And again, this is just the research phase. They sent a survey out to parents and students and staff. There's general agreement that a later start time would be better. But the devil is in the details and the challenges of making that happen. So we're going to continue to study this. The committee has asked that we assemble a list of what are the challenges, what are the barriers, what are the obstacles, so we can take a look at that. This change would not be for next year. This change would be for the year after. So with that, that is the superintendent's report. I welcome any questions or comments that the board might have.
All right. Board members, you good? All right. None, so thank you for that, Mr. Thompson. Other business, old business, I don't have any here to bring up unless anybody else does. I am going to make a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A3(2)C. Matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the public body itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. I don't expect us to come out with a vote for this, so we would not be coming back online after to those watching on YouTube. So that's the motion. Is there a second? Second. All right, second from Dr. Hubner. Melissa, would you mind taking the roll call?
Mr. Giard? Yes. Dr. Hubner?
Yes.
Mr. Cabarrus?
Yes.
Mrs. Pellegrini?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. The time is 9:24 p.m.
Thank you.